Right,
Oh,
right.
got it.
Leslie Skimmerhorn,
Segregated.
and the pond is at this side.
Okay, we're ready. Okay.
And
All right, thank you.
All right, you want to do what you want me to do?
Okay. Roll call. Mary Donner,
Here,
Mary McCann,
Here.
Charlene Gingle, not here, Scott Hennings,
Here.
Adam Wallen,
Here.
Charlie Eldridge,
Charlie's available. Charlie, can you hear?
no, can't be on there yet. You just go past him, and then after we have established a quorum, then
Okay.
we can request that Charlie be included.
okay.
Okay.
I'll be your
Melissa Anderson?
parliamentarian.
Present.
Jeffrey Schwartz, Thomas Burney,
Yes.
Michelle Famios, Taylor Johnson, Patricia Grant,
Present.
Randall Zielinski, Nancy Listman,
Oh.
and Jim McConaughey, I'm sorry.
It sounds like Randy's here as well. So Randy and Charlie will need to be,
No, Randy's.
Randy, he said yes, please
he's
on the
right here.
phone.
Well,
So you added people that aren't,
Lost Charlie.
they're making up the commission, but I find that there's a quorum here. There's 2, 4, 6 out of the 9, and there's 2 attending remotely. So can we now allow them to join us, please?
I will make a motion to add Charlie Eldridge and Randy
Zaleski.
Okay, to our conference.
Thank you, Mary Donner. I'm in favor of that. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, they now can be joining us in the meeting.
Charlie, are you there? I think,
Yeah.
He dropped off for some reason.
Randy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for joining us, Randy. And so as I
I can't
understand,
hear anything. Is anything being said?
no, well, you kind of. It will be.
Roll call.
Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna turn the agenda upside down. We're gonna hear from our committee reports on the study groups. I don't think much has been done. We've been waiting for the existing conditions memo and report, and hopefully there'll be more done between now and the next meeting. And then 2, we are going to go with the consultant who's going to present in a serial fashion the existing conditions memorandum. And after each segment, we are going to open it up for questions. How many segments are there, Brendan?
Look through our agenda here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, roughly 9.
9,
An
and we
opening
have,
plus 9 segments.
9, it would probably have an hour and 40 minutes, so let's try to roughly keep track. Michelle, or Renee, maybe you can tell me how much time we should give to each section. All right, so Renee, do you have anything further to add before we move on?
No.
Adam? No. Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, we have to approve the minutes.
we do have to approve the minutes.
That
Does
goes
anybody
first.
want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Make it easy.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Thank you. Anything else, Mary? Did I miss it?
No.
Thank you. All
I
right.
would like to add something if you don't
Sure,
mind.
please do.
Because there's no place else to do that right now. I would
I'm
ask,
getting total silence on my computer. Is anything going on there?
oh, yes, there is. I've got a microphone in front of me. I can yell loud enough, Charlie, you can hear.
That's not Charlie, that's Randy.
That's Randy? Okay, well, see, I can even do that.
was Charlie.
It is Charlie.
That is Charlie.
It is Charlie speaking.
And Randy's someplace on the other one.
Now I don't know what happened to Randy. So,
I had my microphone off.
okay.
Ah, don't do
You're
that.
still there.
We want to hear you breathe. That's how we know.
No, you don't. My neck is pretty good here.
Don't pant. Okay.
Thanks for not coming.
Coming later. I wanted to add one item to future agendas, and that is after the approval of minutes, to have an approval of the agenda. That sets it up that if anything is going to be changed, it's tracked and memorialized that that's what we're going to do, and it's recorded. If anybody has any objections to that, I don't think we need to have a vote.
No, it's a good idea.
I agree. All right, anything else, people? All right, any committee reports, people?
Me,
Please, Mary.
beyond the one that was already in the report, there's some things that I've been looking at as I've been reading the study. And let's just say, because I'm transportation, I know buses, he knows roads, Charlie knows development, we've got it all set, but it doesn't include things like stormwater management on the sides of the roads, because once you put a road in, you have to have drainage, and the drainage has to go somewhere. Not just have drainage, but make sure the drainage is working properly. So I wanted to add that into my committee report, and also for the benefit of Brandon, who I'm sure appreciates everything I say for years.
I can't do anything on my computer.
Okay, and that is one thing I would like to see added eventually is, it's nice to see all this printing, and it's nice to see everything, it's so techy. My age, forget it. We get to biodiversity, we get into green infrastructure, and if you don't tell me exactly what it means, so we should probably have some kind of definitions. But also on the page with the definitions is to have transportation is this circle, development is this circle, housing is this circle, and show how they mesh into each other, that none of these is separate. Everybody is part of something else besides. Transportation touches all of this. Agriculture touches all of it. Stormwater, obviously. Water capacity, obviously. So if we have a picture of that, Kilroy was here, and you'll get it. I mean, those people will understand. And that's my report. I don't think, Scott, do you have anything else?
No.
Do you agree with me? Thank you.
So Mary, what are you planning to do next? What's, between now and sort of the next 3 months, if that's when our next meeting is, what is your plan of attack?
Well, there are a few places that I'm going to be meeting people along with Mary
I
McCann.
got no sound coming in.
We get in there.
None at all.
But otherwise, I
The only
pretty
time I
much,
heard anything so I can look
I
on the
think we have to
phone.
mute him.
Just-
He can't hear
Remember
us.
when I was having those issues and I just had to call back
I'm
in?
not muted.
Did somebody call Charlie and
computer is
tell him to
open,
call
so-
back in?
Audio is fine.
Well-
I don't know what's going on.
okay, put yourself on mute and we'll figure out.
He can't hear us. That's the problem, is he can't hear
If you're
us.
But you
talking
can
to me, I
see-
cannot hear you.
Because it's Zoom, you can see.
Can I volunteer to call Charlie? and
Yes,
Sure.
yes, please, Michelle. Thank you.
At any rate, in the next couple of months, I will continue to review items, work with PACE, because PACE is doing, we've got PACE in, how far are you on your IGA?
We have a draft.
Okay, so they're working on the draft for that, and going to see if it can be improved in some ways. And we will be, I know Mary McCann and I are going to be meeting with some groups even tonight, just to make sure that everybody's on a page. It's going to be more going and telling people where we are as opposed to what can you give me. If they have something to give us, that's fine. I want to be able to tell them what's happening so people are aware. That's it.
So what is the interplay between the DOT and this group in terms of their planning study and ours? They obviously got started before us.
Yes.
It's an
We
impressive.
have representation here from KLOA that's going to actually speak to that as part of our.
When, on their, we'll wait on that. He'll be making the presentation. Then if I have questions or you do, let's go with it.
Okay,
And if we get it wrong, Scott.
all right. All right, who's got another report?
Okay, shall I go?
Okay.
Okay. So, several of us overlap on the water supply and stormwater. So, we drafted and kind of agreed on where we go. And it's based on a lot of the 2030 plan and especially the water. So the approach, after reading the 2030 plan, rereading it, and looking at how many of the policy statements.
I can't hear anything.
Can you mute him? Can you mute him?
He may be muted,
But I mean, he's not muted for us.
I mean, on his own machine. Somebody could text him.
The audio so far, it's 100%. Oh, I'm not muted.
He needs to go to Zoom.
He just did that.
Just tried it, it
Oh, that
didn't
didn't
work.
work.
Then he should go,
Start the meeting.
if he, get on his phone. He
Oh,
can
I
zoom on
see.
his
Yeah, You
phone,
mean on her computer?
on his computer.
He can call in,
He can
to the
call
number.
in and then he will be able to hear
he can see.
on one and see on the other.
Mute
Yeah, I
himself,
think
call
that's
in. and
probably-
listen.
They both just
He
left.
So
didn't
it's
know it was so
distract-
smart.
It's hard to
I had to do it so often, oh my God.
You're not there.
I will start.
Because he has to be listening through Zoom as opposed to this.
There's something wrong with the system. This is the first time that
Is
I tried to
it-
call in, and I like.
Shall we continue or not?
Yeah, please continue, please
Okay.
Yeah, let's
continue.
go ahead, we'll work on it.
So, in looking at what we want to do, et cetera, as I said, I looked at, and all of us read some of the policy statements. Most of them have not been fulfilled, mainly because they're not dealing with any kind of zoning issue. They're talking about partnerships, collaboration, those kinds of efforts. So for water and stormwater, we also recognize that there's a lot of data out there, and the elected officials are definitely not in the loop. So what we like to do, and Charlene's not here, but we'll talk to her soon, is do some workshops with some public officials, and where they would come and we'd all
To
hear the
enable
same
audio
thing.
control, please enter your audio PIN.
Elected officials, public officials, public works departments, that kind of thing. So we all get on the same page, because this water supply issue is really serious.
Randy, can you hear me?
And pretty much this,
I can't.
Charlie?
I'm gonna try a different computer.
similar approach to stormwater, but I didn't flesh that out, so I'll have to do that for the next time, because we are gonna have to divide them. They're just not, there's just too big a study for both study groups. And then, you want to do agriculture?
Let's see, where should we start? Okay, well, one of the things that we talked about was the big horse farms, the boarding facilities, training arenas, particularly the manure, handling manure, right? So that was, what to do with it and how to work with the horse farms, because we really don't have the dairy farm. That's, I mean, that's an issue in Wisconsin, but it's not an issue here anymore. Somebody had mentioned we only have about 10 dairy farms here in this county now. But we do have a lot of big horse farms, and several people have mentioned to me that there are drainage problems as the land is changed sometimes when people are building their fences and getting their farms set up, and it encroaches and causes problems for the neighbors. So that hasn't really been worked out. among the neighbors. But what to do with the horse manure, because everybody tends to put it near the water for, I don't know why, but they do. And so what I thought I would do is I'll start working with some of these boarding facilities, because where I live, there are quite a few of them right around me. And so I'll personally visit them and talk personally with the people there, and let them know what we're doing, and nothing threatening to people. I'm very non-threatening anyway, you know, with the folks, and so, but just to find out what their needs are, and because one of the things that I had found was that they want the trails to be as connected as possible. This is very, very important. And as the people have been forced out of other counties, because the reason we've got so many big horse barns right now is because they've come from DuPage and
Different computers.
Kane
Sometimes go on there.
and Lake, and
No.
now here.
I'm
So-
getting nothing.
Is that,
I can see Randy. I can see an icon for Renee, but that's it.
so if everybody, you know, can kind of,
But I'm unmuted, and it says my microphone is working, and my speaker is working, but I can hear nothing.
So what about the phone? What about the idea of having him call it on the
Downloaded
phone?
on a second computer.
That's a good
I
idea.
don't know what's going on.
Yeah, so could, who do we have left? Hey Dennis, can I give you Charlie's number? Could you walk him through how to just get on the phone?
Yeah, what's the phone number? I mean, we can just like link him through voice or.
Let him give you the number and
He can't hear.
Right.
He can just call in the number that's on there. Charlie?
Or he can't.
There's a number on the Zoom page that tells them what number to call.
We're gonna text you the number to
Why
call.
don't you?
Anna's texting it to you right now.
Okay, so Pat, I'm sorry that you get interrupted. So you're not threatening. You're going to talk to the folks that are doing horse boarding, and
Yes.
you're going to be trying to look at best practices, perhaps, to protect
Yeah.
water quality.
I think that's one of the things that we have to look at, or that we have to just find out what the status is.
Yeah.
Just find out what's the status, you know, what,
No, I
what
think
kind of
that's-
method are they using to get rid of their manure?
Yes, okay.
And empty, when there are fields that have not been, I shouldn't say empty, because I don't mean empty. These are being farmed rather than having houses plopped on them. But we have to try to maintain those, because one of the things that has come up over and over again is there has to be enough land for people to allow for grazing and allow for rotation of hay fields, and also then for riding to get to the trails. And the more we can link the trails throughout the county, the better off we'll be.
Your access code
That's
followed by the pound or hash sign.
Where, as a matter of fact, in one case, the riding club has actually had to build a trail next to Bull Valley Road, because everybody hates riding on Bull Valley Road, and they actually put a lot of
To enable audio
into
control, please enter your audio PIN followed by the pound or hash sign.
building a
If you do
second
not
trail.
have a PIN, just press pound or hash.
And then,
We should be able to mute him,
Even on there.
because it's on the Zoom.
So, Pat, so the Bull Valley Riding Club, and they've, or,
Hello?
This is just Bull Valley that
yeah,
built a
and they
separate
don't
trail.
wanna, yeah.
I don't know if any other groups have. Bull Valley did though, they built a whole trail on the north side of Bull Valley Road to try to make it a little easier for people to ride without having to get on Bull Valley Road, which they still have to do.
Okay, so let's let the consultants take note of this, and did you see anything in the existing conditions memo that advanced your study group's knowledge or approach
No.
on the? Okay,
Not at all.
Can I add one thing, because that we talked about, but we just didn't get through it totally this afternoon? And that is, Pat and I went to the Farm Bureau, we were invited to go to the Farm Bureau meeting in September. We went to that. They reiterated that, and this is an ongoing request, that they have to.
Please enter your audio PIN followed by the pound or hash sign. If you do not have a PIN, just press pound or hash.
All right.
Well, if you need that, then this, but it's not working anyway.
yeah, so I think that in the
But Randy's
interest,
getting the
I'm just gonna
choice
make an
now.
executive decision that we have to cut bait with the two people who are doing remote, and just let's
No,
apologize
it's
to them.
only Charlie.
Or cut Charlie loose, because
I
he's,
can't.
You should be able to,
I should, but I'm not.
All right, well, let's,
Okay.
hey, all those in favor of cutting the remote people loose? All right, so,
well, I can just, I'll call Charlie and just,
yeah, tell them it's just not working, huh?
yeah, and it's,
Access, we can hear meeting, I don't know that you
Yeah.
can do that.
Okay, so where were we? We were
So,
with Mary,
so
talking
we
about
went
going to
to
the
the-
Farm
Yeah, we were
Bureau.
at the Farm Bureau.
Yeah,
they have requested this for a number of years, including, I think, way back as late as 2012, that the county create a commission or a committee
I
to
heard
talk
you
to
for
the
about 30
farmers.
seconds and let it
So-
go off.
And that would be listening to
Sound
farmers
out.
from every sector. So as our study group, we're going to try that. We're going to create a committee of people from all the different sectors, bring them together and have a list of issues that we want to address. And bring a core group together, and then one night bring in the people from the horse so we can hear what their concerns are. So at the end, we'll have a list of all the concerns and see what we can. Yeah, we'll turn all this over, and we'll let I don't see anybody here from Ag. Oh, I know he's here, no, I did see him. Yeah, there he is.
so Mary, it's been
So we'll
said
get to
that the zoning regulations over agriculture are, maybe Adam or Renee can weigh in on this, are pretty limited in terms of what a government can do in terms of regulating ag.
Correct,
And
correct.
so, does the horse boarding operation under the county ordinance constitute an agricultural pursuit? And therefore, there are limits on what the county can do to regulate, like having so many acres of pasture, the method of disposing of their waste.
Right.
So that all that is, even though it
No,
might
not the
implicate.
no, the method of
Disposing
handling
of-
their waste is definitely a Department of Agriculture issue.
Okay, what
So
about
we
the
can-
county health department? Does it too have
No,
jurisdiction?
horse farms are regulated by the Department of Agriculture.
Okay, so the county really has very little role, and it's a matter of cajolery to get
Okay, what
horse
happens
barn
is,
owners to.
okay, so what happens is, if somebody does a stream analysis and finds E. coli, they do let the public health, the environmental health department know.
That's fair.
And then they identify that location and look at the perimeter to see the whole radius or whatever,
Okay.
to define it, and then they call the Department of Ag.
Okay, so if there's any inconsistencies with some other people's knowledge about this, please bring it up at an appropriate time. So, this is,
So we wrote it out
this
based
is
on what-
wonderful what you guys have done, and I thank
Okay.
the two of you for doing it. Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just gonna make two comments real quick.
could you identify yourself too?
So I'm Scott Kuykendall, the Water Resources Specialist for the Department of Planning and Development.
Thank you, sir.
So, handling of horse manure is actually addressed in the Water Resources Action Plan. So we do have recommendations in there. And then this is also a topic that comes up with the county's solid waste committee. And, horse manure can actually be maybe not a profitable product, but a desirable product for composting. It's so high in nutrients, so it's actually something that can be
The
beneficial
problem
to
is, that-
composters.
and this is what happens when you go from cows to horses. Cows usually are bedded on straw. Horses are bedded on sawdust. And that sawdust, you can't just apply to the field because it robs the soil of nitrogen. So that composting process takes a while. And that's when people think, oh, I'll put it
All
out
right, so
here.
Mayor, let's not get too deep into the woods,
No.
but it's,
I
but
prefer
what the
commercial
Scott,
compost.
what Scott is saying is that there is some literature out there that we
Right.
recommend that you consult, and work with him on this as you develop a plan. Michelle, you don't have anything today, do you, as far as reports?
Just a second, I just wanted to bring up one thing though, related to manure. And it isn't, because it isn't just horses, let's not forget that. It can be anything, it could be hogs, hog manure is a problem in areas too. So it certainly isn't a matter of, we're picking on horse farms or
Right.
anything like that.
All right, well, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, our time for this subject is past, and, we've had these distractions, and I just alert everybody, we may have to go 10 or 15 minutes longer to meet our agenda.
I just want to be sure, that's all.
Thank you. Mary's done transportation, Mary McCann's done water resources. I don't think we'll get a report from Charlie today on economic development. Michelle, you'll have something the next time we meet, right, on affordable housing?
Sure.
Okay, agricultural protection, we've talked. I sent everybody today my solar power, powering McHenry County into the 21st century. I got one response. I'd sent it out several times, and really haven't gotten much of a response from Pat and Taylor. So what I envision, and I put it in the presentation and the cover letter, is I'd like the authority of the commission to go out and try to find sponsors and to basically work towards putting together a symposium on solar power, bringing together landowners, solar power developers, the utilities, municipalities, on a lot of different ranges. One, for planning and how the entitlement process works in their community. Two, for being a potential purchaser of the power. And three, for land that they may have available for these kind of facilities. I had some interesting interviews. I think the question is how much energy does McHenry County need on a daily basis to move forward, and then convert that into how much land would that take? So it gives us an idea of whether we could solely power ourselves with this or not. Like you want to do in the agricultural thing, I want to engage the Farm Bureau because they are the ones who represent the largest landowners. There's a neat, nifty chart that was included in the existing conditions memo, and I thought the existing conditions memo on the subjects I was interested in was very well done and provided me with a lot of information I didn't have, and I commend the group for doing that. It shows where the power is, the power capacity. If I'm reading it right, it looks like the power capacity is where there is a large number of large vacant farmed land. I would like to bring all these various elements together. I foresee it over at the county college, or foresee it at the Loyola Environmental Center, where we can really have like the shopping center convention has a ICSC, and we're not going to go to Vegas to do this, but where they bring together the major players to try to basically do deals and figure out solutions. So I would like to get started on that. I realize you're just really seeing the whole thing for the first time tonight, but I would like a yay or a nay, even if it's just an email, just to me, copying Renee and Adam, so I know that I have the authority to move forward on this as a regional plan commission study group on green infrastructure. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I just have one thing, I'm in this group, and I hate to throw water, cold water on this, but if if we look at the experience of Germany, Texas, and California, green power, you said your green power, solar and windmills are insufficient to handle anything. And it ends up that you need your nukes and you need your coal-fired plants. That's just the way it is. Even these, you know, like the electric cars and all of this sort of thing. Where are they getting their electricity?
Yeah, I just ask you to keep an open mind about it, and
Yeah.
to see that where we have large amounts of farmland, and that this is a way to store that farmland. It's a way to a way to save farmland, because you're preventing municipalities by putting these solar farms out here from expanding, and that's the only way that farmland is going to get converted into housing subdivisions is through.
Go ahead.
I guess the question that I have is how exactly the program that you're talking about doing, how that's gonna work with the planning process. Because we have the planning process here. So we are here now, we're on number 3. So I'm hearing a lot of different ideas about different groups that we're getting together and that sort of thing, but we have a scope of services and we've started the project, and I guess I'm not understanding, is your, Should we wait?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm trying to, I'm pretty frustrated, Renee, you know that. I think that this is a worthwhile effort on the part of the Regional Plan Commission to initiate a process for looking at the possibility of getting solar power approved in the county. And to basically create the power purchasers and the developers and the land and and so it doesn't have to, we are a regional plan commission, and it seems to me that we can go off and do things that aren't according to the numbering system on this plan. And
Well,
it's working on a parallel fashion.
okay. The county board has given us direction.
And I'm just gonna ask you this, Renee.
And
Can-
so that's what we, the staff and the consultant, we've been working hard behind the scenes, doing the stakeholder interviews and compiling the different data and that sort of thing.
I'm not gonna stand in the way of it, like, I think additional input would be great, like, if the group has the bandwidth and the willingness, to be able to produce additional input in this process, I think that's great. I think we can keep moving forward, and that's part of the next steps we'll talk about at the end of the meeting, is kind of, next steps is hosting some additional workshops, developing vision statements and goals. It doesn't mean we can't augment stuff that we draft in the process.
My
later
point is
on.
not to
Yeah.
involve you at all. It's basically a parallel path to what you're doing, to look at, as part of a regional, there's no doubt that regionally planning for infrastructure is part of, could be part of our charge.
Give me a second. As much as I would like to jump all over your body right now, I won't, because I think that you have a really, well, maybe, but not here. Jeez, people. Okay.
At least you guys are awake.
I agree with you that we have to really look into solar energy and doing things with solar, but what you're talking about is doing things right now to be prepared for 2050. And I don't think we can get that far until at least 2030 because there's too much going on. If we give as much effort into solar as you've given us the ability to get into everything else, we'd be here until midnight all the time. I like the idea, but I think that you're kind of bulldozing your way into it, and it's going to not cut mustard with a lot of people who look at numbers, who aren't happy with solar. My daughter had a place that was supposed to go in right across from her on a farm, unless you were in the middle of Stoddy's farm or Richardson's. Don't put a solar panel thing like you have on Charles Road.
Yeah,
So you can't do that. But for us to go as far as, let's take in Holiday Inn and their ICSC, and let's take in this, and let's do this, and get all these major planners, that's a whole different thing that I don't think any of the rest of us are prepared to be able to
And
handle.
it's something that I'm prepared to take on. I'm not asking anybody else, except under the auspices.
You just
of-
did.
Of the Regional Plan Commission.
But you
All
don't. No.
all I'm asking for is your authority to
No, you're
move
not.
forward.
You asked us to go out and find people that would be able to do stuff. I heard that at the beginning. My mind isn't that slow yet. The first thing you said is you wanted us to have input to get people together so that you could get people together. I don't know who those people are. Are you going to do all of that yourself?
Yeah. I was certainly inviting people, if they had any other suggestions, to provide them to me, because I'm not the repository of all information, so I would just appreciate suggestions. But this is something that I feel passionate about.
I can tell.
I think it's a role of the Regional Plan Commission, and I'm asking the authority as the Regional Plan Commission to initiate this.
But we only have 2
Okay.
years to do it.
Okay, now wait a minute, Mayor. So I'm not gonna go as far as Mary and suggest anything like she did, but anyway. Anyway, so,
Wow.
these study groups are supposed to be fact-finding. And I think when you mentioned all the kinds of people you want at the table, that went beyond fact-finding. If you invite people who might want to do something because they have property, they want to invest in the thing, that now becomes something that we're asking and supporting that you're doing that, or supporting the whole idea. The idea is that we need to look at the facts, what it means, what the conditions, what the issues are, and then come up with some policies for the county. And you don't actually do that with people who are investors wanting to push you into, you need to do it this way and the way they want it. Even where we are is at a fact-finding stage. So the most I think you can do is to have some people come in and talk about what some of the issues are for the farmers, for example, and what some of the technical issues are from the solar panel people. And today I just happened to find a company that does this,
Okay,
has the
all right,
solar
we're
shingles.
running out of time,
And
so
so
just,
that needs
would
to be an
everybody
option.
would everybody just send me their yes or no's? That's.
No, I think we need to take a vote here right now, because everybody should be on the
Well,
record.
I haven't had enough information. I never got the email, but then I don't live on my computer. So I checked it this morning. I didn't check it this afternoon.
Well, it's also not on the agenda.
It's
for a
not on
vote
the agenda.
That's the other thing I would have to just raise a
Right.
flag on if we're gonna make an actual.
Well, no,
move.
it's not an action, he's actually asking for an opinion, so it's,
Okay. Okay, that's fair.
so I think several of us have given us our feedback. Okay.
Brandon, are we ready for Brandon to dig into the ECI?
No, I think we want the opinion. So Nancy, what's your opinion?
I wanna look into it more. I mean, I think it's a cool idea. I don't know about the, I think it's a really exciting sounding idea, but I'm guessing maybe some other organizations having your, involved. If you don't get the plan commission involved, maybe there's a lot of other organizations out there that would be really interested in having something, and I think it would be great to have it in McHenry County. So.
But not the Regional Plan Commission. Pat?
I'm a little concerned about the fact that it's very expensive and it's liable to end up being in the laps of the taxpayers of the county.
Well, the policy whether you like solar or not is really not there. The idea is I'm not looking for any of the Regional Plan Commission budget. I'm not looking to involve the consultants. I would think that we'd be able to get people to contribute to make this happen. It's an educational event for you know, that's why I thought it'd be good to plan it at the county. I mean, there's a lot of steps in between to get it done, but I'd like to get it started or find out that I don't have the authority to try to move forward on it, so, Mary, what's your opinion? Yes or no?
This, Mary?
Yeah,
Not right now, no.
okay. Michelle?
I have some questions, so I don't think we need to go into that now, but I can maybe email you some of the questions. I guess I'm just trying to understand how it will fit into the final plan and the product of this committee.
Okay. Mary, no?
So, yeah, I don't know. What concerns me, the other thing that concerns me is that you're getting sponsors, and I think that's beyond what we should be doing as a study group.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. Time for Brandon?
Yes.
All right, so tonight we're going to review the existing conditions memorandum. We've got the full team here to answer any questions you guys have about the content in the memo, and also maybe pieces you'd like to see or maybe tweaks you want to see made to the report before it's finalized. But this is kind of our first interim deliverable, and the idea is to make this available to the public for review as well once this group is kind of given their nod. It doesn't need to be officially approved, but we can revise it after this meeting and I think just get an approval to post.
So this is an all-round conversation.
Right, so
Raise our hands.
Yeah, so we'll go section by section and just kind of pause at each kind of major topic point just to ask the presenter kind of what questions you may have as we go.
Okay.
So again, just a reminder, great team, House of Beans leading the charge here. But we've got Zio Siddak on board to help with the green infrastructure, with all the resources components. KLOA is here to discuss transportation. Laura Gillespie's here to talk about historic preservation, and then Solutions to the Land is here to talk about agriculture as well. So we've got a talented team with lots of knowledge we can share tonight.
So Mary did her homework.
We'll walk through the project, talk about an outreach to date, and the bulk of our time will be on the existing conditions report. So just again, a reminder, about a 1.5 year long process. We're basically in month 4/5 here at the end of phase 3 where we're delivered the draft conditions report. We're having this meeting. This meeting kind of marks the end of phase 3. Obviously, we want to refine the report before we post it, but this is really kind of the end of that. Where are we at today? Phase in the process. The next step, which we'll talk about at the end of this presentation, is to start outlining that vision, hosting some additional engagement opportunities, and really moving forward from kind of current condition to future. What are we trying to achieve with this process? And I do think there's definitely room for additional input. We've done some initial engagement, obviously, up front, but as you all are doing your due diligence and getting more input from the community, we're happy to kind of, I think, evolve whatever we're pulling together in response to what you present to us as well. So if we draft a series of vision and guiding principles midpoint, and you give us your reports, you know, after that's been delivered, it doesn't mean we can't change things. You know, we can always change things until we get through adoption. That's the whole point of this group, is to have an interaction with you all. Just outreach to date, we had the kickoff with you all. Municipal workshop series, we had workshops in Cary, in McHenry, and then out in Marengo. And over the course of those, we met with a couple dozen folks from different municipalities to kind of get basically municipal planner insight in terms of the trends they're seeing, the things they're trying to address within their own planning efforts, things they'd like to see the county help them out with. So we had some good conversations with those folks, got to talk with a planner shop. Boards and commissions workshops, we had a series of workshops. We had a water resources workshop, Farm Bureau, green infrastructure. We met with some housing folks. So we had a series of kind of topical focused engagement points with different entities just to make sure we're getting that perspective. We knew, like, the water resources group, for example, was formed because of the direct ask from this group during our kickoff meeting that we make sure we're having a focus group about that. So we tried to take the responses or input we got from you on the kickoff and respond to that. Key stakeholder interviews, we've had phone calls and virtual meetings and in-person meetings with a wide variety of kind of stakeholder groups, key organizations, key individuals that were pointed to by staff. And then there's a project website that's been providing access to the online survey and the map.social. So for those 2 online components, we've had about 500 points of contact. Pretty good, could be better, but it's, I think, a really good starting point for us to understand community priorities and concerns as we're getting into the next phase of the process. And that survey can remain open. We can kind of keep receiving input as we go through the process. But we've, I think, got a good understanding to start. And the link to those online survey results is provided in the report. We thought about formatting it as a PDF, but if you do that, how many pages was it, Tricia? Like 60 pages worth of content?
It was close to 500 pages.
There you go. So it's a lot of feedback. We pulled in kind of summary components from that into the average summary, but we have all the data available for you all to review as you'd like. And then this is for folks that chose to give their location information because it was optional. We feel like we've got a pretty good geographic spread. Obviously, you know, it's pretty lockstep with population distribution in the county. So some of the key outreach themes. Supporting attainable housing. So there's definitely discussion across groups about the need for housing in a variety of price points. So whether it's different stages of life or different income levels, kind of the availability of housing product to kind of meet your needs. Water supply and resources, really, I think, a strong emphasis on the natural environment for folks that we're engaging with, recognizing the importance that water plays, I think, as part of the heritage of the county. Improving active transportation, really just the need for better bike connections, better trail connections. That was spoken to not just in terms of recreation, but also in terms of just pure need from an economic standpoint as well. Being able to provide opportunities for folks that maybe can't afford 2 cars or maybe even 1 car for the household. Promoting open space and agricultural land, again, recognizing the role that agriculture and open space play in this county. It's obviously important to this group, and it's resonating with the community as well, and the input we're receiving. Exploring sustainable practices of renewable energy. This was kind of a marching order from RFP that the county board issued, and it's being echoed in what we're hearing from folks online and during our engagement process. The need to alleviate traffic congestion. You know, we were chatting a little sidebar before this meeting started, just talking about the kind of nature of the beast with a lot of people living here and commuting. You know, you've got very much an imbalance in terms of housing and employment. So that creates an imbalance in your roadways as well. So there's definitely, I mean, congestion is always a top 5 issue, no matter which town we work in or county we work in, but it's definitely coming through in the average here too. And then practicing smart growth. I think people are recognizing the county needs to grow, but there's kind of an undertone that we want to make sure we're capitalizing on existing infrastructure, that we're growing out in a smart way that helps kind of balance the need for ag land preservation and open space preservation. So a lot of the themes we're hearing from the community and this outreach, I think, are being echoed by this group and vice versa.
I thought one thing that was very interesting was that it also with the attainable housing was the farm housing, was the need for farm housing. Is that something that you've seen in other areas?
That came from the folks we were talking to about employment and workforce housing issues. So that's kind of a unique thing for, I think, rural areas like McHenry where, like there's a need to be able to provide access to that housing within proximity where people are working on these farms. I think it came through in the ag group as well with Ron and David's group.
Well, what you have to understand is, from somebody who lives in the rural area, that there was attainable housing, and it's being purchased at outrageous prices. And so, that's the market, no matter what you do out there, if any attainable housing is coming in, because there's a whole push to
Corporate
people, no, they're not
farming
corporate,
or-
no, they're locals.
So something that what I found that was fascinating when in talking with the housing group was that they noted that the price adjustments that are made in Harvey were actually happening at a faster clip than in like the more developed parts of the county. So Harvey is seeing a greater.
Harvard.
Harvard. Oh, Harvard? You mean
Harvard.
I'm sorry,
Harvard.
not Harvard.
Harvey's a little
Yeah,
south.
blending two
Yeah, a little
people.
south.
Harvard, there we go.
Way
Well,
out
it's
almost
right.
the border.
Yeah, so Harvard rents were going up way faster than what was happening in like more developed parts of the county. And so like they're having a problem balancing kind of the need and being able to provide kind of assistance to bridge that gap because the federal government won't let them raise rents as quick as they're going up. So
Well, they
there's data to
probably
support
have the most affordable or attainable housing stock of any community.
Right.
Okay, so that's where all the workers live. That's where all the
Right,
farm
but-
workers live.
and then it's the nexus of transportation issues, right, where more affordable housing tends to be in areas that are farther out, which transportation costs then kind of eat away at that benefit too.
Right.
And that's something I wanted to note, something we'll leverage moving forward. Center for Neighborhood Technology, I was talking to the director, Bob Dean, who's my former boss from CMAP, at the planning conference. They just updated, like, got the email yesterday, their housing and transportation index. So it's a way, it basically combines cost and transportation costs, or housing costs and transportation costs together to create an index to show you kind of the true cost of living in an area. And that's something we're gonna kind of dive into, I think, as part of our next steps in this process. It's a new data point that literally just got updated with the 2019 census information, and it was released yesterday. So we're gonna fold that into the process as we move forward.
So, yeah, we have to be mindful of, and Charlie's not here to do it as the zoning guru on here, that the county has very little ability to do much about attainable housing. I mean, because they don't have any requirements, federal requirements to meet that a certain portion of their land has to be, or their vacant property has to be in attainable housing. So that's the difference between a municipality and an unincorporated area.
Right, so I think that's where we can get into it, but like, when we start talking about land use policy and what the county wants to encourage within unincorporated areas versus what it wants to encourage municipalities to do, I think there's some cross-pollination there where municipalities are looking for more density right now. They're looking for that greater attainable housing. And I think what we're doing is the county is fine with pushing density to happen in those areas too. So it's kind of a win-win
Right.
if we can get density to cluster in certain areas. So,
Is attainable housing, is that the new word for Section 8?
no, I'm very purposely not using the word affordable to avoid that conflation. By saying attainable, I'm not trying to.
But it sounds like word speak, so.
Yes.
So let me be very direct. I mean, usually when people hear affordable, they automatically equate it with subsidized housing in which there's, Section 8 or some other kind of assistance. That's a portion of the affordable housing spectrum. And so by, I think, using the word attainable, which is workforce housing is often used as well. What we're trying to do is say, we need to reframe this discussion because it's not just about people who need a subsidy. And we have the cost burden numbers in this report that we'll go over. There's a lot of people in McHenry County that can't afford the house to live in. It's not just people in the low and low moderate income.
Definitely.
So that's why we're trying to use these phrases to help have that
I
conversation.
just needed some clarification.
Yeah, but I want to make it clear that we don't have any objection to Section 8 housing. This body
it's just-
doesn't
I'm
have any
just asking
opposition to
it, yeah.
that. No, and we should be promoting that for the people who can afford it.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it needs
And
to
then
be
we
a
shouldn't be
broader discussion.
avoiding terms like this to somehow whitewash it. I mean, that's something that we have a responsibility to attract, to
Yeah.
provide housing for these people who are less prosperous than us. Right, Pat?
Yeah, I agree,
Good, good.
Yeah, you be a straight shooter about it,
But I guess what I'm saying is we're talking about more than subsidized housing. And
But
most people-
it's in the
when
Venn
people
diagram,
say-
it includes
yeah,
it all, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's also millennial, when I think of, the term that you're using, it reminds me of millennials that are not buying houses at the rate that we did, because they can't,
There's barriers,
you know,
right.
and, attainable, so that makes me think maybe perhaps it could help millennials and, Gen Xers right under them.
Technically, I'm a Gen Xer. I don't write on there as there.
But that's important, you know.
It is.
So we're getting in front of this, I'm throwing a lot of stats at you already, but I mean, again, we're trying to, go ahead.
Did you want feedback on each? I know we had just covered sort of the outreach. Did you want feedback on that now, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
do you have some questions about the outreach? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a question, it's more just, you know, I think we can never have too much outreach. I feel like the 461 responses from the survey is not sufficient to represent, you know, the entire community. Just would encourage doing whatever we can to bolster that engagement in this portion, or if there's additional opportunities in the future.
Yeah, I think I'd like to keep the survey open throughout
Okay.
much of the
And any
process.
suggestions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We sweated out at the fair, we did everything we could think, and.
So-
I think a digital advertising budget
Yeah.
is
So-
gonna be
So
so.
we
Well,
did.
there was,
I
yeah.
saw
But we
some.
did some of it,
Okay.
yeah. We
So, yeah.
we boosted some
And that-
up
and that was a-
on Facebook,
That was great, yeah, I
and
mean,
we
that was
got,
a
yeah.
good boost, I think we
We
went,
got
in
boosts
that period of
from
time,
it.
we went
Yeah.
from 210 up to the 400s, right?
Yeah,
In that
it's-
brief period, so that was a good push, so, Michelle, that was.
But one of the things to build on what she's saying is that if you look at the dots, the majority of the dots are still in the incorporated areas as opposed to the unincorporated areas. And,
Right.
and that's a real, so the priorities of people in the incorporated areas are completely different than the people in the rural areas. And reaching those rural people is what's important.
And
Yeah.
perhaps to put all of us to work, a task that would be helpful for this committee is for us to do some outreach to the community groups that we know might be interested in engaging in this. So, you know, I would be happy to like draft some language that we could all share around to the groups that we engage with and encourage them to share with their memberships to engage with this as well.
That'd be great.
And
I think that would be great.
similarly, Huntley, Marengo, and Harvard, I think are areas that, we're gonna see growth, especially in Marengo and Huntley, and I think they're underrepresented, you know. It's where the population is, but Huntley is never slowed down. In '08, it's still, the Tribune said how it was still building houses in the crash in '08. So I think we're a little underrepresented, don't you, Mary? Like in the,
Oh,
Huntley,
absolutely.
Marengo, and going up, you know,
Mhm.
it's under, and even Hebron, you know, it's.
Well,
So-
definitely the Marengo area, and the bottom, well, the two dots are on either side is Union. And, yeah, absolutely. So because well, Huntley's way over here, this going.
Right where it says
No,
Kane
no,
County,
no.
just to the
Oh,
left,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
Huntley.
Yeah.
And we're right, you know, and so is Marengo because of 90.
So-
We're right for growth.
As part of next steps, I mean, we're trying to organize some workshops for the week of November 28th. We're gonna kind of save this for then. So I think as part of that advertising and promoting those events, we can also say, can't make the workshop, fill out a survey, so we can kind of keep that out there. Happy to leave the survey open throughout this process and kind of re-tabulate things towards the end to make sure we're still checking with what kind of input we got at this point in the.
Michelle, did you have any more comments on this section?
Just that the map, .social is like really clunky. I don't know. I had a hard time understanding how to use it, so I don't know if other people interacting with this portal did as well.
Okay. Anybody else that comments on this section? Are you ready? Go ahead.
Sorry, about the map, I just wanna know, for the part of the survey, there's a question of like where you live. That question is optional. So this is the people that chose to respond to that question. So it's a little misleading. So we might have more responses in the western half of the county, but those people might have chose not to answer that question.
Anybody else? Oh,
I kind of do. I'm not exactly sure, because I don't have anything right in front of me. But in the very first section of the report itself, it talks about McHenry County being part of the MSA, the Naperville, Libertyville, this thing, that thing, and all kinds of stuff. And then it says that we're 18 miles from Chicago?
Right.
Huh?
It just can't be right.
It-
No.
It is, I measured it 5 times, from the southeast corner of McHenry County to O'Hare is 18.
But that, you can't take O'Hare as being
It's the city of
Chicago.
All right. Well,
No, you're not even close. You've got to get all the way through Rosemont, Arlington Heights, and every place else before you get to Chicago.
O'Hare is part of the city of Chicago.
Yes,
but-
I know.
Okay.
But
So-
it is, that's the one thing you're going to have all kinds of people looking at going, why am I reading this? If they're going to say, unless you're talking about this whole 19 counties are part of something that ends up being close to Chicago, and it muddles the works.
I didn't like that.
It was 75 miles for me in Woodstock to drive down to Midway, which they use for all of their calculations
So
for
is the way to
anything.
correct it is just clarify that
Right.
it's 18 miles to the northwestern edge of O'Hare
Well,
Airport, which is in the city of Chicago.
So,
It's a useless number.
It's okay.
Fair
I mean, it's just,
So,
if I think, if I find that it's muddy, I don't know that people who don't know what they're looking at anyway are going to take as much credence into what there is. I'm not saying that your measurements are wrong, but I'm just saying, we all know how far Chicago
agree.
is. If I have to take a train.
We're gonna-
That's right, yeah.
it's a long report, so we can't wordsmith each paragraph.
That's
but-
okay.
So I'm asking tonight for kind of high level, like, things we want, discussion points, those kind of comments, we're happy to
Right.
take them in.
Right.
But please email those.
Okay.
And if you can send them to Renee, Renee can send everything
Okay.
through to us.
No
So the
problem.
purpose of this piece of paper, this memorandum, was tell us where McHenry County is today?
A snapshot report, yes, of kind of current condition.
We don't want a snapshot, all right. Okay.
Okay, so,
don't
and
know
this
what to
is,
do
we're on
with that.
section 1, people.
Okay.
Is there anything else on section 1? Not hearing anything. Look, section 2, is it really necessary to go through section 2? This is just a summary of all of our
wasn't-
plans.
Wasn't going to.
Who was going
I
to?
have a presentation that I was gonna walk through that,
Okay.
we're gonna kind of jump into the meat and potatoes of the demographics, I think.
Section 3. Good.
So we'll kind of just skip through this. I mean, it was gonna be 2 seconds, we're already there. I mean, we are, I guess, past plans and studies, the group, I mean, it was kind of very much underscored at the front end of this process that those are very important to this, and I wanted to make sure you guys understood that we did review as much as we could to fold into our current understanding of issues and concerns. Each knowledge expert really took a deep dive into their kind of area of expertise in terms of the past plans and studies, and we've incorporated all of these components into our understanding. They're briefly summarized in the front end. So with that, I will hand it off. Tricia's gonna take over from here. I'll keep sitting up here, but.
Just sit next to you.
Or you can stand if
All right, hi, everyone.
Hi.
All right, so, getting into demographics, I'm just gonna go through some of the key things that we found throughout the report, just gonna try to go through this high level. So first and foremost is population. You know, you can see by this graph that you guys were growing for quite some time, but between 2010 and 2020, your growth has slowed. In housing, we touched on this earlier. So your home values and your rents are increasing, and so is your cost burden. So how we define cost burden is anyone that's spending more than 30% of their total income on housing. So it's up for both renters and homeowners, but particularly renters. Almost half of the renters are burdened by their cost of housing. Income, you are now at $90,000 about for your median household income, and it has grown about 18% since 2010. Employment, manufacturing sector, your jobs are going down, you're losing manufacturing jobs, but you are gaining jobs in the retail sector. Looking at your market for office, you are expected to increase in rents over the next couple years. Retail is in good health, so that ties into your gain in jobs. in the retail sector, and it's projected to just increase. Industrial, you have a higher vacancy rate than your MSA, but that ties in with your loss of manufacturing jobs. Multifamily, so your rents are increasing and they are increasing at a similar rate to the MSA, and your vacancy rate has been decreasing. Do you want me to stop and have any questions, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, that was
go through?
obviously a quick review
Yeah.
of the demographics section. Having had the report for a couple weeks, any kind of key issue areas you want to discuss?
Mary, you want to start?
No,
Oh, it's Michelle.
Michelle.
Okay. so-
I had a question about the graph on page 44, the multifamily vacancy trends. Can I see that, Amber?
Yeah, it's the CoStar chart.
Oh, is it on here?
Oh, yeah, yep. So the East Suburban McHenry, the forecast shows like a significant uptick in vacancy rates in 2023. Do you know why that is?
I mean, so CoStar also tracks deliveries and anticipated like development, so I believe that's because of some projected increase in supply.
Okay.
So they'll be adding units, and then that leads to a kind of quick uptick in vacancy before it drops down again.
I'm surprised that we're expecting that many multifamily units.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's only an uptick of what, 3-4%.
Okay, I have something. Do you have, okay, if you all remember, the Jane Addams Hull House kind of ideas of the turn of the last century. Seems like we need something like that right now. And to coordinate and coincide with the kind of situation that we have right now, where there needs to be some assimilation and some assistance to families who are coming into this area. And I'm wondering too, you mentioned the retail's increasing, so you're saying fast food. Retail, what other retail would you be talking about? I mean, it's just fast food, right?
I mean, it's
What are you talking about?
Commercial.
commercial,
Like
so like
Home
Any commercial
groceries,
space.
at stores, in other words.
stores, services, yeah.
Stores. See, the wages for that are really low. And so there needs to be some sort of additional help, let's say, for people who are working in those fields. They're not making anywhere near enough money to live anywhere.
Yeah, and this section is not necessarily dealing with retail employment, it's just saying like your retail commercial market is relatively stable. It's a good thing, like you're not having an issue with vacancies compared to other parts of the region, relatively speaking.
Well, yeah, I get that, but it's just that I think you also have to take into consideration, as long as you've got your multifamily and you've got you're talking about what kind of work. We've lost in a lot of industrial, and a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, lots of them over the last couple of years due to the government shutdowns and so forth. So they're gone. And I'll tell you what, I'm really surprised about this, but there are, to try to find people to do the work that kind of you're circling around there. Holy smoke, I'll tell you what, landscaping guys, they can't find a human being at all. Farm families who need help, the crickets, there's nothing. So I'm just telling you that right now, so that when you're looking at these kinds of jobs as part of your profiles here, keep that in mind, because where these people are got me, because they're nowhere to be found. And that has been going on now for a while, and it's getting worse. So where are they working, or are they not working, or what exact is, I'd like to know more about that. Where are they? What's going on?
Can I ask a few questions? Your graph on page 29, could you explain why the square footage measurement? What is it? There was an odd measurement for, is this population? What is that blue and yellow thing? So in square feet, right?
Yeah, that's an error.
No, it's square miles.
Square miles.
Yeah.
So it should be square miles?
Yeah.
Okay, so, so you're saying that the square miles of unincorporated is 429.2 and the incorporated is 174.2?
Correct.
Okay. Why the graph at the bottom, any explanation for the meager growth since 2015?
Really since 2010, yeah, you've grown by 0.5%.
So is it the effect of a specific policy to go no growth to prevent, because I don't see the no growth going on in the cities and villages. I see it here in the county. It's pretty close to impossible to get anything approved. So Crystal Lake is, grown a lot. It's proving a lot of, so that anecdotally, this is not jiving with my experience. So can you explain that?
I don't have, that's kind of part of the next steps. I think it's trying to figure out kind of what's driving these trends and then what are the policies to maybe address them. In general, the Chicago region as a whole has slowed down a tremendous amount.
With that graph, go ahead, Dennis.
I was just gonna say, this is a topic that we actually addressed in the Beyond 2030 plan.
Yeah.
Which is one of the many plans that we reviewed. And that was done in 2016, so we're already seeing the trends. And there are two issues at least. One is property taxes. We've got some of the highest property taxes in the state, so from the standpoint of residential development, that's an impediment. The other is we are losing millennials in McHenry County. So if you look at a chart showing population broken up by age groups, there's this huge kind of hole in the donut in the 20 to 30-year-old range. So those people are leaving the county, moving to the city, moving to other areas where there's more employment.
Okay, so that's a tangible thing to address.
That's something I think we'll get into with the demographic analysis.
Okay, the graph on page 30, is this a fairly optimum age distribution? I'm sorry, is this distribution to indicate a healthy community? What you're showing in this chart on page 30, have you come to any conclusion?
In terms of, you're somewhat comparable to neighboring Kane County as well as the region.
Yeah, that's what I saw. So
you're a little bit older,
yeah,
but not
appreciably,
especially
statistically.
In the 55 and up,
Yeah.
55 to 64 age category. To Dennis's point, you'd like to see a higher 20 to 34 grouping there to indicate kind of growth that's happening and progression. So that kind of highlights what he was just speaking to.
Okay, so then the next graph, how statistically significant is it that we have an aging population? What does that tell us from a planning standpoint, planning for 2050?
It tells you that the aging trends are more exacerbated here than they are other areas of the country, in the county and the MSA. You're going to see more need for changes in housing, for example, to account for aging in place that people are speaking to because they want to see increased need for healthcare and services.
Okay. All right, so you'll look and see if we've planned for those kind of facilities sufficiently.
Yeah,
and
that's
what's
a
the need for
national
them?
trend, but it's kind of more present here.
Okay, on page 32, the statement, the key takeaway, McHenry County housing stock is growing steadily and consists predominantly, and that fact seems inconsistent with the lack of population growth that we saw above. So does that seem inconsistent to you?
Consists predominantly of owner-occupied single-family homes.
So So we have a population growth over the last 10 years of how much? And that, say that's meager, so, I mean, I just thought that the two statements were inconsistent. The graph was inconsistent with this statement, this key takeaway.
I mean, you have it shifting, you're having a shift, I mean, it's slowly, but it has been a steady creep in housing units. You've grown by, 4,000 housing units in the last 10 years.
I think it's 1,400 people.
And it's what?
I think so 4,000 housing units and I think 1,400 people.
Right, so you're having a shift in housing composition and so slightly more rapid increase in housing unit growth.
Okay.
Would you really more? I think we're talking about the fact that this is really more focused on the cost burden issue.
Would you just to check in with the Crystal Lake people in terms of the number of apartments and condos that they've approved and are approving, you know, over the course of the last 2 years? I mean, I think it's significant, and it might change your analysis about what's going on, because this is countywide, right? This isn't just.
Yeah, this is countywide data. I mean, this is census data, so it's about as accurate as we can get.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that anecdotally, you are going to be interviewing planners in communities, and you can sort of double check that. Is that something that you can do, or is that outside the scope of your assignment?
We can ask for how many, permits. I mean, you can look at whole lot of permits. You can see from census data how many permits are being issued.
Good. So, yeah, I just feel like maybe looking back at 2020 doesn't give us a true picture about what's happening to our housing stock.
Again, I mean, 2020 was used because it's the latest
I understand.
long-term ACS.
I understand. I just think that there have been trends in the last couple of years that sort of run against the conclusions that are in here.
Yeah, and we actually have language in here about that as well. Yeah.
I wonder, because at the time of the census, the political climate was, I think a lot of undocumented people really didn't want to be, I kind of got the impression that they avoided the census, could have avoided the census more than normal, given the political climate at the time. And plus, there was COVID and there was everything. And I wonder how many, people that could be, because that actually, a lot of undocumented, there's a lot of younger, they're younger, a lot of,
So the 2020 ACS is, we use 5-year averages. So it's the average number between 2016 and 2020. It's the most consistent longitudinal data you can get. 2020 data is only available for certain types of information, like racial composition. It doesn't get into household demographics. So we can definitely try to augment this with maybe some other data sources, but it's always going to be dated. We're only in 2022. The government is always a couple years behind in terms of data collection versus data points available. I don't know, did the transportation ECRUs, what did they pull?
Well, the way we think about this issue that's been brought up for the last 10 minutes is if you look at average household size, that's where these trends are most visible, right? So we still have growing housing stock and we still have slightly growing population, but when you look at the average household size over time, it's gone down significantly.
Right.
And I think that might help a layperson kind of, take this information and easily digest it and make it understandable for them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's how we kind of talk about this issue.
If I could just go to page 34 for a second. The average household value over time. When we compare these various areas, don't you need to add the real estate tax component? And because that's the package that people are buying. Because I look at it and say, hey, there are really good values in McHenry County for households, for homes, and we should be selling them. And we don't have the tax information. Second of all, the next chart, average rent over time. What bedroom units are these rents based on? 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms? I mean,
I think this is median rent. We can add that information in. It's median rent. So all units, what's the median?
So anywhere from a studio to a 4-bedroom, and that's the median and you get that from the census data?
Yes.
I'm not sure it breaks it down, the rent check.
But I think, yeah, our title is the,
Oh. All right, so then the fact about the cost burden, what significance is that to planning for the future? As far as the income for housing, you know, this is on page 35. Do you come to any conclusions? Do you make any suggestions on the basis of the cost burden for housing?
I mean, the significance here is, I think it's really trying to put it in perspective for people. I think the housing crisis over the last couple years has helped, I think, more people realize what's happening, but this is hard and fast data that shows even in 2020, you know, X% of your neighbors can't afford the house they're living in. So it's trying to, I think, maybe humanize a bit that affordable housing discussion we're talking about earlier.
So it suggests more affordable housing for, that's what you're suggesting, but again, that can't really take place in the county, right? 'Cause
Again, I don't want to conflate subsidized housing.
No, I'm not into that issue, I'm just saying, that
Well, I
people
mean-
who can't afford their existing homes need cheaper housing.
Right, so part of that is looking at providing greater housing diversity and variety, for example. So instead of just building, you know, larger lots, single family, or even just single family itself, looking at townhomes, quadplex, triplex, what's called missing middle housing. So we're trying not to be too leading in this report. We're trying to report kind of, these are the facts, ma'am, just the facts. But as a
Yeah,
planner,
but-
I want to like link this to changes in housing policy over in terms of the plan itself.
So when is the synapse coming between these facts and policies, and what can be implemented? What part of
I mean,
the?
that's the vision, guiding principles, and land use framework. We'll start to frame that out, and we will all have to agree that, do we agree that trying to encourage housing diversity is a proper response, yes or no? I mean, I think that's one way we're leading right now, is an example. So we will frame out all these key recommendations and kind of policy direction with the group. Agree that, yes, in general, that's the direction we want to head, and then we'll use the rest of the process to test those policies, refine them, and come with a final direction in terms of detailed, kind of research-supported recommendations.
Okay, and so, and what you know about the county, and based on this chart on page 29, there's probably very little opportunity in the unincorporated area to implement that policy. It's got to be implemented in an incorporated area. Would you agree?
No, I mean, there's lots of, I think there's opportunities to coordinate with municipalities to plan for those edges.
There's that, there's other things, the county's currently doing, like the ancillary dwelling units we allow.
What?
So ancillary dwelling units, where you can build like a granny pod in your home. I mean, that is a component of affordable, housing affordability.
But we gotta be careful talking about the ancillary dwelling, because it was originally put in granny and pads, or whatever you wanna call them. And it's morphing into, housing, rental housing. And I think that's not what originally was the.
But that's something the group can then discuss. I
Yeah.
think, is it okay that it's just becoming a more affordable housing option?
Oh, I
Not-
don't, I mean,
yeah.
it's got,
Yeah.
it's right there, to be discussed, absolutely. But,
And maybe we need to tweak the policy, or.
So is that a permitted use in an agricultural district, Renee, or is that do you have to go in for a conditional use?
No,
or-
it's permitted.
And so you have to prove a relationship with the people who,
No, no.
No, the only
But I just
guideline
threw it out as an example of, the county, there are things the county can do for housing affordability. I just threw it out as an example.
no, I like it, I didn't know.
The owner has to occupy one or the other. That would be the only stipulation that we
Okay,
really
can you
have
only
in
have
terms of
one?
residency. And you can only have one.
Okay.
There's some options.
So-
I can send you that section.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, we have about 30 minutes left and 100 slides.
Okay.
I mean, we had about 45 minutes worth of presentation content, and we're about 8 minutes in. So we can keep going through this.
No, keep going,
Yeah.
Go, please.
We got the existing land use discussion, and then we'll hand it over to.
I
the
can
rest
skip
of the team.
zoning. Since we
Sure.
wanna go
You
through
can
it.
skip zoning, yeah.
Okay, do we wanna leave questions for the end. I can
Well,
just
no, I
go
think
fast.
we can pause again, but let's just kind of keep it
Okay.
rolling and again, we're happy to answer questions, and if there's questions about the data points after you've read the report and want to feed them to us, that's welcome as well, but.
All right, okay, so, existing land use and development, so existing land use is an important part of, you know, how, when we step into future land use and doing that portion of the project, so looking at what's currently on the ground in your development patterns. So, we identified 12 categories, approved, different types of land use. This is our map, so you can see that you're mostly ag, which I'm sure you all know. And then you have, secondary would be your single family, kind of interspersed between that ag and then grouped in those like unincorporated pockets near the eastern side. Looking at your land use change, so this is land use change within the county. So you increased about 4%, we mentioned that earlier, but so your units increased by 4%, but the amount of land towards residential increased by less than 1% between 2010 and 2020. So we're thinking that likely these were built out, looking at the differences in the other land uses and how those changed, that your vacant land has decreased. So we're thinking that the residential that was built in that time was on vacant subdivision parcels for the most part. Municipal growth, so as we mentioned previously, how municipalities are growing does affect what's happening in the county. So in 2000, the municipalities took up 140 square miles, and then 2010, they took up 170. So pretty big jump. And then from 2010 to 2020, they only gained about 5 square miles. So looking at the population between those times, between 2000 and 2010, your population increased by 19%. And then, as I mentioned, it has slowed. So between 2010 and 2020, it's about 0.5%. So I'm going to show you the map. So the land that's the darker area, that is the newest annexed municipalities.
Do you know what page that is?
Page 58.
Thank you.
Are you also controlling it?
I have a.
Oh, you have a clicker.
I'm not changing it, I was just highlighting.
Yeah. So looking at kind of the growth, we're thinking that a lot of the areas that has been annexed within the last 10 years hasn't really seen new development. The biggest part is that area along Route 21 from Marengo going down to 90. 23.
Yeah.
That's a tiny little number, can't read that.
It's hard to read, no worries.
All right, and then moving on to municipal land use planning. So 19 of the communities have a comprehensive plan, and one unincorporated community. And then there are several communities that are in the process of updating their plan or have expressed interest. So we need to take those into account as we're moving through the process.
Thank you.
All right, so preliminary issues and opportunities related to land use. So proactively plan for growth. So you guys are not currently growing as rapidly as you were previously, but that opens us up to the opportunity of proactively planning for the growth once it starts to occur again, rather than reactive. And then, preserving ag land in those open spaces are something important to the community, so having that opportunity to proactively plan for growth, we can, strike that balance into the future, like balancing those two aspects. Need for commercial nodes. So one thing we heard was that there's not a lot of commercial areas in the county. They're mostly clustered around those key corridors, specifically Route 47 was mentioned. That means people are traveling longer distances, it's causing congestion. So as we're moving into the land use plan, or the future land use plan, we have the opportunity to identify appropriate areas for commercial nodes to kind of create that that node for the community, so they're not having to travel those long distances, and it's a matter of convenience for them. Vacant and underutilized land. So there hasn't been a new suburb platted in quite some time in the county subdivision. What did I say? Suburb, my bad. But you guys still do have a number of them that are either mostly vacant or partially vacant. So those are an opportunity for growth, residential growth, without having to take away from another important land use like ag or open space.
I just have one quick question about that. So there's a huge subdivision by Hackensack on the eastern part that they're just, maybe that's too late to be included. Like maybe you didn't see that, but I think it's part lake, but it's also McHenry.
Okay.
And it's very big. It's, I can't remember what it's called, like Lakewood Falls or something like that, but, it's very big, and I see it on my phone all the time. It's near Hackensack. And I think that would be like Wonder Lake and stuff.
That is Wonder Lake and
Off
you talked about off 120? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Wonder Lake.
But that's
And
been there
that's,
for
so
a
that's
while.
McHenry, it's McHenry probably and Lake, right? So I just thought I'd tell you that there is.
No,
one.
it's McHenry.
It's McHenry,
It's
yeah.
all McHenry.
So that's been there for a while.
Was
though,
it previously
right?
platted
No,
and
it's
now it's
new.
coming out of the ground?
Correct.
But it was
Okay.
platted a
It was
long time
previously
ago.
platted, so
Got it.
it would've been
But now it's seeing development now? Okay.
Yeah, just so you know.
Since 2007 was planted, I believe.
I see it on my phone all the time, so it is true. But it is true.
Yeah. Okay, and then last issue, opportunity I'm gonna go over, is coordination with, municipalities. So as I mentioned, 19 communities either have a land use plan or are in the process of updating them. So and that also leaves 11 not having a comprehensive plan. So we have the task of trying to align the county's future land use plan with the ones of the communities. So the challenge is trying to get that information that is usable to us in some kind of way so we can map it. And then the challenge is also understanding or figuring out what those other 11 communities want going forward so we can try to best align our future land use plan.
Do you identify the communities that don't have comprehensive plans?
I can't off the top of my head, but it is a page in our plan.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yeah, in the report, yeah, sorry.
So if we had talked to in all 17 townships, a lot of those townships, at least, I don't know, would have had land use plans if they had planned it out. Because that's what we used last time, their land use plans, that's the Western Hampton County. Okay?
Okay.
But they're not included here, but just so that you know, I'll find out if there's who's planning one out there.
I know Nunde Township has one, has had one for 20 years, a land plan.
Yeah. A lot of them have them, I don't know they've been all updated, but, right.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Any questions before I move? Oh wait, no, I'm skipping zoning for time?
Yeah, we'll skip some of the time.
Okay, Ron, you are next.
Can I just, one suggestion? I run into a situation on our zoning ordinance where the least restrictive residential zoning district is like half
Oh,
acre.
wait, sorry, not Ron.
And there are, so when you apply
Wait, sorry, it's him.
when you apply an R1 zoning requirements, or maybe I've got the district wrong, at 20,000 square feet to a lot that's only 10,000 square feet because they were platted, they're along the river, they're on some of the little lakes in the community, trouble develops. And it seems that we ought to be able to be proactive so that those folks, for example, your impervious surface requirements, it's difficult to meet those and really dress up your property when you're stuck with an impervious surface requirement that applies to a 20,000 square foot lot and you only have 10. And so I thought that looking at what the violations that the county has cited people on, to see if the problem could be in our ordinance, and then there could be some suggestions to modify those things to make it easier on the residents.
Okay.
Okay, so, those are called legacy lots. And they're in the legacy overlay district. They're the same ones that.
Well, these weren't, this is on Lake Killarney, so
There's
there's
a
no.
much
They are.
different.
They should,
Well,
but they fall in that category. I
But
don't
we
know if
still
they're
had to go
listed.
through a variation, and we're cited for a violation and the whole thing, so I don't think the legacy lot business, we can talk about it offline.
Oh, okay.
Let's let the
They
gentleman
might
here.
not be a legacy, the size sounds like a legacy lot, but.
Hello, everyone. Brendan May with Calaway, and I'll be going through transportation and mobility. I did want to start by saying that as you read in the draft report, our section, we were waiting to present any findings until we got the draft of the McHenry County Moves 2050, which is the ongoing long-term transportation plan. We wanted to make sure the items that were being addressed in that study were concurrent planning efforts with the comprehensive plan, which is why there was no specific data in there yet. So I'm going to go through some of the things regarding existing conditions and some issues and concerns and potential improvements that we've identified concurrently with that plan.
So you're seeing this kind of first time here, it'll be documented in the actual report.
Yeah. So I'll go through the first few slides quickly. The first part of our section will include a comprehensive combination of the roadway network, including interstates, the US routes, state routes, county highways, township and municipal roads. The next step will be a compilation of the public transportation. You are served by the Union Pacific Northwest line, 4 different PACE routes, as well as MC Ride, which is the curb-to-curb on-demand service provided by PACE. We also took a look at the existing freight movement, first with the truck route system, primarily consisting of the 1 IDOT Class 1 facility, which is I-90, as well as the 9 Class 2 facilities, which are all of the US and state routes. There is also served by several local truck routes. We also took a look at freight movement. So the freight rail system consists of the Class 1 railroad, which is the Union Pacific. That's the main line that runs from the southeast corner up to the northwest corner of the county. There's a Class 2 railroad system, which is Wisconsin, South and near Spring Grove and Richmond, as well as a Class 3 spur that kind of travels west from Harvard off the Union Pacific that travels outside of the county. We also look at the bicycle pedestrian facilities. As was indicated earlier, some of the concerns with the polling is the lack of active transportation network. As was cited in the draft report of the McHenry County Moves 2050, while over 70% of road miles are suitable for biking, there is also a high percentage, 73% of road miles that don't have any sidewalks available for pedestrians to walk. So this kind of leads into some of our findings and key issues. We also cite several major trails, and these are more heavily documented in the McHenry County Moves, but we'll be highlighting some of the more important ones. Looking into some commute to work statistics, again, as previously indicated, there is high concern with congestion. So of the working residents within the county, only 31% are working within the county. So we're talking about a lot of road miles traveled for people going south to get out of the county, southeast to get towards the city. And with these residents who are commuting, 83% drive alone. So there are not many opportunities, or people are not utilizing public transportation to its full potential. And then a lot are driving, which leads to the congestion that we're seeing in the area. So a lot of the key transportation issues that we've identified so far relate to the 70% who are leaving the county to go to work and how 83% are driving alone. So auto use remains the dominant travel mode within the county, with traffic congestion primarily occurring along the major routes, all the state routes. And this is due to limited direct access to the highway. You have the one interchange with I-90, as well as the limitation for crossings across the Fox River. I think within the county, there's only 6 or 7 opportunities to cross from west to east over the Fox River. So that leads a lot of north-south congestion in the southeast corner of the county. The vehicle miles traveled are projected to increase by 45% up to 2050 from population and employment growth. This will further result in congestion if not supplemented with more public transportation. These are some more as it relates to high workforce commutes by car, limited use of public transportation, the frequency and the reach of the public transportation. There are some gaps in the network where even if you live in a more urbanized area, you still have to drive to access to public transportation. And then has been raised with the concern the gaps in the active transportation network, as well as limited sustainable transportation infrastructure. And I do have a note to add definitions on some of these words. This one more relates to EV charging stations and more eco-friendly types of infrastructure. So then we then identify some potential transportation opportunities.
Run that, back up. What was the last thing you said?
So the bullet point on limited sustainable transportation infrastructure.
Yeah, what you said after that, you had a
The incorporation of
garble there.
EV charging stations, low emission type infrastructure, stuff like that, getting that more incorporated. So leading into potential transportation opportunities, a lot of these are roadway capacity improvements, whether along corridors or at intersections, roadway infrastructure upgrades to improve the quality, which supports an increase in freight or industrial growth. Extension of metro service and improved service and frequency. Rerouting some of the PACE fixed routes to maybe incorporate some more urbanized areas. Expand on interconnected bicycle and pedestrian systems with intersection safety enhancements, some more sidewalks, crosswalks, better pedestrian facilities. Prioritization of multimodal paths in new commercial centers or new residential developments.
What's a multimodal path? So many ways to go?
Yeah.
Multiple ways to go.
Bicycle walk, more wide, so not just a tight sidewalk where the bicycles will be on the road, there's a wider off-street path.
You're saying new commercial centers? We have so many vacant buildings. Strike that.
But there's,
New
in
commercial-
30
Or
years.
saying as development occurs.
Yeah,
Making sure
redevelopment,
that there's
Making
bike
sure that you've got
paths.
bike paths.
And
Okay.
Marengo and Holly were like that. Grove. Maybe where you are, there might, there could be empty. Yeah.
But I'm just thinking like, oh, I threw this look around like in Crystal Lake, oh my gosh. I think Route 14 is a dump. It's terrible. And a lot of abandoned buildings and so forth. Those are the things that need to be redeveloped, not new things.
It would be both, yeah. So not necessarily, not just a new, but as things get redeveloped or refreshed, providing more emphasis on a pedestrian, full, vehicle and pedestrian.
So Crystal Lake has a plan for the mall site that they're gonna rehab and make sure that includes a multi-use path as part of it.
I just think you need to keep that in mind when you're going through all those things there that you have to look back at some of those places that have been, they abandon them and then there they sit unused and now they move on to something else. Stop doing that. Get back and work on those previous things. And the other thing is roundabouts. We'll see how that works out here in Illinois. You're gonna end up tearing them all out.
Giving in there.
They're a joke.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
The only question I have on any of this is the introduction of PACE Pulse Arterial Rapid Transit Service.
Sure.
You are assuming that there is ever going to be, number one, fixed route service
Yeah.
enough out here to make a difference. And Pulse, it took us 6 years, and how much work with the state to make sure that we could do what we had to do. It was hugely expensive to do, and what all it does is jumpstart other existing, like the 270 from Gulf Mill to the Jefferson Street Transit Center. There are like 7 different stops and it saves 2 minutes. I think you can kind of take that out even for 30 years from now. It's never going to happen out there.
Sure, we include it as a consideration to try
Understand.
to.
But if people think
robust-
that there is something that's going to be anywhere close to what Pulse is doing on those roads and the acceptance by the communities, it's a great thing for the communities themselves to advertise that this is the fancy station and it has heated this and it has this and this, but you're never going to ever see that out here.
Can I have a motion to extend the hearing for 15 minutes to 8:15, the adjournment?
So moved.
Anybody opposed to it? All right, so we've only still have, because of the distractions at the beginning.
Sure.
So just remember, we can write down our questions as well. So you want to continue on?
I think maybe jump to the connection to the long-term plan.
Yeah. But then as we move forward, just as we're developing these recommendations, we are looking at near-term and long-term plans. Near-term plans include the 5-year plans by both the county and the state. And long-range plans are continuing to coordinate with McHenry County on their Moves 2050 plan, looking at the old comprehensive plan, other things within the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. They have regionally significant projects that they recommend, so those will all be incorporated in our section.
Maybe a couple of minutes of questions. Did you have anything, Miss?
Nope.
You're
it's
just
great.
waving your-
No, I'm gonna write it down.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else? Mary McCann, got anything? Okay. We're ready.
Ron, you're up. Okay. Agriculture. There's still agriculture in McHenry County. Okay. So the highlights of agriculture and in current conditions. Someone was talking earlier about the census and the measurements and things we have in agriculture. In agriculture, the USDA does a census every 10 years. And so the last one was done in 2017. And at the end of 2017, they said, well, farmers sold about $164 million worth of product and they spent $168 million growing that crop. So that's a kind of a dire picture. But when you look at agriculture on an annual basis, there's ebbs and flows of profits and losses. So when you just pick out a particular year, it's not representative that agriculture is making a lot of money or losing a lot of money at the farm gate. So my concern about the spending of $168 million is that money all goes out of the county. None of that money is being spent in the county. And it's a huge economic opportunity to get those inputs coming back from inside the county. And I'm going to tie that in a little bit with the earlier conversation about horses. Our land conversion to non-farm uses, folks, in the last 20 years in McHenry County, we've lost 1/3 of the farmable land we had. 2008, 2009, housing slowed, but if you look at the disappearance of farmland in the last 20 years, only about half of it went to housing. The other half went to warehouses, wider roads, bridges, a lot of other things. We were talking a little earlier here about solar. If we're going to have 50%, 60, 100% of our electricity coming from solar, it's going to take space to put that. And yes, we can put it on farmland. And yes, there's some other compatible uses. If you keep the sheep small enough, you can still graze underneath them. They're calling that agrivoltaic now. So that's a hot new thing. But at the end of the day, these farmers that are complaining about the roads being too narrow to drive their combine down,
and the need for better infrastructure for that, they're not gonna like farming around all those solar panels. And so that's a consideration as you look at these alternative uses. And I know Brian and Dennis are gonna get up here and say that we gotta be concerned about water, and I was hoping the water guys went ahead of me. So, you know, what do we do with agriculture? We produce food, feed, fiber, fuel, fun, agritourism, but we also produce a flow of ecological services that nobody measures, nobody pays for, farmers don't get compensated. Now go back to that spending 168 billion when they're only, or million, when they're only bringing in 164. They don't get paid for the hunters. They don't get paid for raising deer and feeding those deer. In fact,
You're assuming they're doing that willingly.
Yeah. So it's estimated that the deer hunting industry has more revenue in it in Wisconsin than the entire corn crop.
Right.
So do Wisconsin farmers produce corn as a commercial activity, or are they just raising deer feed? So part of the solution is to recognize our agriculture for the ecological services that are being provided. And currently in agriculture, we just try to get rid of water as fast as we can, because we gotta get out there and beat the neighboring field, right? So let's just get rid of that water, but then later in July and August, we need that water back in agriculture. But as our water guys are gonna tell you, we're not recharging our aquifers. So what if we have recharge zones for water, and farmers are directing that water into recharge zones, and they get paid for an ecological service that they're providing. So why isn't farmland being preserved? Because there's really no money to preserve farmland. Kane County, which is just to our south, and I've worked with Janice Hill a lot down there, they've got 5,500 acres of agriculture with permanent conservation easements that can never be developed at a cost of $32.6 billion, or $million, I'm sorry, 32.6 million. Now, if you had 32.6 million in your treasury to go buy conservation easements on this farmland, I'm sure that, you know, we could get that done. But fortunately, you haven't done it yet. So what you can do when you're ready to spend that $35 billion is be strategic and buy those conservation easements in an agriculture zone that's consistent with ecological services, like a water recharge zone. And or do you want to buy the easements where you want to put the solar farms? But these things need to be figured out ahead of time. The USDA now is talking about climate smart agriculture. Agriculture gets a bad rap for the negative impacts to the environment, but there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Farmers here in McHenry County are using strip tillage, where they're deep placing half as much phosphorus fertilizer and getting the same corn yield from it. And from an ecological standpoint, they're providing some additional services. Farmers are discovering self-organized, self-imposed conservation efforts that started here in Illinois, and they're among the most successful conservation efforts in the country. So there's, in terms of current conditions, there's kind of a bright spot there. McHenry County has a vibrant agritourism. And I know, we got 3 different ways to spell agritourism, with an I, an A, or O, it doesn't really matter. But the money generally circulates local. So agritourism is not in competition with large-scale conventional agriculture, but the inputs and the outputs are in county money for the most part. So what are the future needs of these issues and opportunities I've just identified? If we're going to get serious about farmland preservation, farmland preservation is something we mention, we bring it up, we talk about when it's all said and done, there's a lot said and nothing really done. So there's really less than 200 acres in the county that have permanent easements as a restriction to deed to protect that farmland. Until you restrict the deed, that land is not protected as farmland. But it takes money to do that. The federal has some matching money, but you have to have money for them to match. This conversion to non-farm uses, I think we have to be smart. When you look at the utilization of land, when you put a solar panel on it and you graze underneath it, now you have more than 100% usage of that acre. So if you can get your land usage up to 140, 160%, that farmland usage will be well applied. What I wanted to mention about the horse farms is there are 2 farms in McHenry County now. They're in the northern part of the county that are making compost from their horse manure. And one is commercially selling it and has really moved up this last year in a viable market. Why? Because nitrogen's selling for $1 a pound. Potash sells for about 52 cents a pound, and phosphorus is about 80 cents a pound. A ton of horse manure has about $20 to $30 worth of nutrients available for the farming public that they could buy from the county, and the money would stay in the county. The problem with horse manure is it's still raw. And unless the horse stables are willing to keep it for a while and compost it, it's not usable to the farmer. But when the farmer needs and the horse stables match the supply with the demand, there's a good viable market, and all the horse manure of McHenry County could be going to ag uses in McHenry County. And it's starting to happen. The other thing was that came up with our farmer group is that there needs to be just more coordination of planning. You know, farmers maybe have land in 5 different counties. They're working with different FSA offices. They're working different jurisdictions, different rules, and they would like to see some consistency in those. So that's my talk.
Who wants to ask any questions? Anybody?
So you met with a horse group. Okay, all right, so we didn't know that, and I would have been interested in joining, I'm sure Pam would
Right.
too. So we'll get the details later. I think there's one thing that sells here, and that is that farmland actually helps the taxpayer save money, because the public services, and it's that old study from the early 2000s, for every $1 spent, or that it costs on taxes, or I got this backwards here. Anyway, you know, 36% is 36, it costs 36 cents for $1 worth of services. That would be $1 worth of public services. But the farmer, by not requiring those services, only costs 36 cents. Now, we have to do that for inflation, and I just didn't have the wherewithal to do it. But I think that that sells to people up here because everybody's so tax sensitive. And I think that's one of the things that, I think in the 2030 plan, it's one of the first things that's mentioned actually, but I think that's a very important one. And people don't realize it until suddenly they're spending, the municipalities are spending a lot more money than they thought they would for that big 1,700 home subdivision that's going in there Wonder Lake. You mentioned restricted farmlands. We used to have agricultural zones, and I need to investigate. I think they just fell off the radar, and so nobody used it, but how they would work. Let's see.
So you could add to that agriculture zone, water recharge zones.
Right.
Solar energy generation zones, and you could design those so that you're re-infiltrating water where you need water in aquifers, and you could be real intentional about that design.
Right, exactly. And, no, I thought you made some really interesting points. And one of the things that I wanted to know was the current acreage we have in solar now, so people can get some perspective on how much we already have, because there's quite a bit up under solar panels around here. You know.
We have a lot more planned than we actually have.
So you presented a lot of points, and you probably read my memo, because I was like, okay.
I did read your memo.
Right, okay, so
thought
I
that's
did
why
my
you wrote
homework,
it.
I'm just a teacher, and so I'm like, okay. Actually, I wrote a lot more, and I decided not to give the whole thing, but I will, I got it right here.
Hey, maybe we got 12 minutes,
So, okay,
and I don't want to cut you short.
all right, I think we're all confused about what we're supposed to get out of the report and what you just talked about, because there's a lot more that you just talked about that wasn't in your description. And so, that's confusing. I mean, I appreciated what you had to say, but, I could have read it too, but, so how do we connect the dots? What, you know, if the purpose is where we are now, you kind of covered just one aspect of what we need to look at in terms of agriculture now. But we have a whole bunch of other issues, not just the horses, but a bunch of other issues in the ag.
So Brendan, Adam, Renee, do you want to
Yeah.
answer Mary's
How are we gonna
question?
do that?
In terms of the dot connecting?
I'll turn it over to Brandon. I mean, long-term, we
In
would be
In
going.
terms of what's in the existing conditions memo versus what was just presented?
Well, yeah, but there, and so what he presented, I really liked, and then we got another set of what he wrote, but that's still not nearly the whole picture of what's going on in agriculture.
Well, this step was to do the current conditions.
Right.
And so, in our current conditions of agriculture, it's all there. The only thing new is the opportunity for horse stables.
No, I don't think that's true, because we haven't talked about hemp growing, cannabis growing, and we have a number of people growing hemp and cannabis. Hemp is not an issue, but cannabis, well, hemp doesn't take water, but cannabis does, takes a lot of water.
So, the report stands economically, farmers are breaking even. There's not a cannabis grower, or not a hemp grower out here making money. Simply put, it's not sustainable, it won't stay, it's gone.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't put it in and document that we're doing it in 2022 or 2023 and for the future, so looking forward.
Well, I didn't go through corn, beans, wheat, and all the other crops
Right.
that aren't making money either. But none of the crops are making money. Nothing is making money, period.
So,
The
yeah.
only money farmers are getting comes from the government. Everything is losing money that's produced, period.
Okay, so why should we preserve farmland? So I'll tell you where I'm interested going.
So Mary, you know what I think
At some
Mary, what I
point-
think we need to do is get permission for you to talk to the gentleman offline,
Okay.
you and Pat, so
That would be
that
fine.
you can answer your questions and report them back to the group as part of your study group report.
Okay.
They
Well,
can
the
say-
only thing in the report is when farmers don't make money, they sell their land off. And that's exactly what's going on.
Right.
The income is coming from the sale of farmland. That's in the report. It's
Right.
also in the
But
report
there's
that they're all
there's
losing
an
money.
outlier driver that if we don't say something to the state, the whole state's gonna be in trouble and we won't have any food up here. And so it's
Mary?
it's a total mission.
Mary,
So,
can we,
yes.
really, we have 10 minutes and you and I have to leave. You
Okay.
can't stay that
Okay.
long.
Thank
All
you.
right.
And we need to hear about water. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Would you agree that the counties in the last 10 years has done a pretty good job of not converting farmland into development? I mean, based on the statistics that you're seeing here?
The statistics are the same. Farmland disappearance is at a steady rate, hasn't declined.
No, the farmland hasn't, has it? So the policies that have been in effect or the economic conditions have naturally, and then I think you're gonna have a hard time, I imagine, getting a farmer to put a deed restriction on his ground, because that's where he's gonna,
He's gonna sell it for retirement.
yeah, okay.
Absolutely, because he's not making any money farming.
And that's not something the government can do.
So with all the talk of farmland preservation, everything else, farmland disappearance has stayed at a steady rate for the last 20 years.
Okay, and that, I think that's the sense that this group wants as well, so thank you, sir. Water.
Right. I'll give you the whirlwind tour here.
Sorry we're giving you short shrift, sir.
Yeah, my name's Brian, I'm with Geosyntec. Before I start this discussion on water resources, I want to let you know, Ron touched on this, right? Everything here is interrelated. We look at these things in silos, unfortunately. That's the only kind of the way you can get through the information. It's all related. So I'm looking at it in 3 parts, which I'll talk about. All 3 of those play off of each other, so keep that in mind. So part 1, groundwater and water supply. Sorry, I had to fix my animations here. Surface water, stormwater and flooding. Okay, here's a graphic everyone here has seen since they've been to grammar school, right? Nothing exciting here. So McHenry County is heavily invested in working with the USGS and the Illinois State Water Survey. SCAD has been an incredible resource for this type of work. In a nutshell, and this is not an accurate statement, but the USGS is looking at it from a water quality impact to the groundwater. State Water Survey is looking at it from more of a availability, pumping, and supply standpoint. I can't see that graphic, but there are some red dots floating up there. What this is meant to show is some of the work that the USGS has looked at, and it has to do with the salting of the aquifer, shallow aquifers. And what this is showing right here is that there's been, within the last, well, I shouldn't say last 10 years, but certainly has drawn attention over the last 10 years, is that we're seeing increased salinization of our groundwater in relation to some of our roadways and large impervious surfaces. And again, this harkens back to a later discussion about infiltration and that whole, how do we get the water back in the ground if we can't keep it clean? I don't think you can see this, but this is in the report. And essentially what this is draws off some of the work that the State Water Survey is doing about groundwater recharge and supply. So, you know, not only have we changed the way water flows in the surface, it's changing also in the way it is functioning in the ground. Overpumping and the demand is kind of retarding the way it recharges naturally. And so what this is just showing you, and their way they did this was obviously by monitoring the wells that they have, which I'm not going to show you due to some time, but it's essentially showing you that there's obviously areas where it's more impacted than others, but they all interplay. They're all pulling on water in different directions. Right here, this is a graph that was done by the Illinois State Water Survey. It's intended to try to show that trend line. Okay, where are we? What are the projections on demand? And what are they based on the recharge rates? It's essentially showing that, and there's information in the actual existing conditions memos that shows that as of today, we are right now slightly over the actual sustainability of the actual aquifer to recharge itself. And the key thing to take into consideration is that that doesn't take into account like industry. So, you know, obviously a goal that we talked about is trying to encourage some development. They can't project those things. All they can project off of is a baseline. So if we grow at a certain rate that extends and brings in high, heavy, water demanding businesses and industry, that's not reflected in those trend lines. And the last bit before I move on, just so people understand, this is a map that I did. This is actually information taken from the Illinois State Water Survey. This is to kind of give you the idea. Now, some of our groundwater comes from central Wisconsin, but just a simple mathematics of this, it takes half a lifetime for groundwater in the Ironton-Galesville aquifer, and this is straight from the State Water Survey, 5 feet per day, so it's going to take half a lifetime for that water to get from Marengo to Crystal Lake.
Wow.
Now think about that. You drive that in 15 minutes.
Does anyone disagree with this mileage calculation?
I double checked it.
Sure.
But I think
That
that,
is if it gets to Crystal Lake.
and I will just say that is actually fast in the groundwater, because we're sanding and gravel. Surface,
Except there were no houses or wells in between.
well, I mean, yeah, that, but they take that, I think that they've taken that into account in their calculations. It's an average, keep in mind. Surface water, so this is, again, real quick. These are just numbers that show the total documented, amount of river streams and named impoundments and lakes. This goes back to that discussion of groundwater, right? So base flow, and I think we have the actual source for this in the existing conditions report, if I don't want to get it, but it goes to show that base flow, basically, in most of the streams, is lower than it should be. That's why you'll see some creeks that maybe you didn't see before, run dry a lot more often. Is essentially the groundwater table is lower. That groundwater table is essential in keeping that base flow in those streams where it's at. So they may not go dry, but essentially they're lower, operating at an average lower elevation than normal. Okay, so I'm going to talk real quick about the topic of impairment. So 65.5% of all rivers, streams, and creeks in McHenry County are listed as impaired by the Illinois, well, it's by the federal EPA. 11.2% of lakes and named impoundments are also listed as impaired. This is the best part, only 20% of all streams are actually assessed, and only half the lakes and named impoundments are assessed. Impairment, and actually have the formal definition over here. So what is impairment? All right, impairment is an assessment that is done by the federal EPA, saying it down to the IEPA. It's meant to be a means to determine whether water is meeting a threshold. All right, it's a barometer. All right, so if I tell you that, you know, water for TSS, the metric is 20 milligrams per liter, that doesn't mean anything to you, really. If I tell you that for water, chlorides is 500 milligrams per liter, that doesn't mean anything to you. But it doesn't necessarily have to mean anything to you. It's a threshold that they can use to determine when they sample this stuff, whether or not it's meeting that. Is it too salty for fish to live in? Is it too salty to drink? It's a list of categories, and we'll probably have to elaborate on that in the actual document to give you that. But it is a means to assess water bodies that people can have. Otherwise, you don't know whether these water bodies are, and I'm going to use air quotes and say clean or dirty.
So, sir, we are at the end of our extended time, and
Did I eat all that hour up?
I'm afraid we did, but you want to just maybe, can you wrap it up in a minute?
Yeah,
or
so real quick, wetlands in McHenry County are some metrics. I saw in Mary's memo that we're desperately in need of an update to work that Dennis did when he was still at NIPSI. This is just metrics on loss of wetlands, okay? It's there, it's happening. Stormwater and flooding. What's important here is this harkens back to the importance of some of the stuff that Dennis is going to be talking, well, maybe not talking about, green infrastructure and making sure the stormwater is clean. When you get to impervious cover of 10%, right, and that doesn't seem like very much, it's well documented that you start to see impairment impacts to water quality. Stormwater and flooding, just real quick, that, you know, this attacks on two fronts. In 2019, the Illinois State Water Survey they didn't look at it, they already published it. So they started looking at it in mid-2010 to 2015. They have reestablished the rainfall values for Illinois. Essentially, they've all gone up consistently depending on where you are in the state. Some areas are more than others. What does this mean? Well, anything that was designed prior to 2019, undersized. All the flood maps that were done prior to 2019 are outdated. So essentially, we are at odds with our infrastructure. What happens is essentially, if your pipes are undersized, you have two things, right? It leads to localized flooding, which may or may not be on a floodplain map, and it also, your detention basins are undersized, so that leads to the bigger picture of river, streams, and lake flooding, if you want, will be. So that's kind of it.
All right, well, thank you.
Can we give Dennis and Erica 5 minutes each? I mean,
I would like to. Does anybody have an objection extending this meeting till 8:30? Could I have a motion?
It's fine.
It's too late to go.
What is that? What?
Oh, I'm talking to Mary. We were just going somewhere, but that's all right.
Okay, all right, good.
We were
Dennis.
going to make a presentation.
We're gonna go to till 8:30 then. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Mary, I heard you loud and clear. You asked for definitions. I'm starting with definitions.
Thank you.
Green infrastructure. So green infrastructure has a couple definitions. One is stormwater, BMP, swale, bioswale, rain garden. Definition here in the context of this chapter is this interconnected network of open space, both public and private, things like wetlands, conservation district sites, et cetera, that provide these various services. We're also asked to address active recreation here, which is basically using open space and green infrastructure and trails in ways that will basically be valuable to the public. So again, biking, hiking, even things like hunting and fishing, snowmobiling, cross-country skiing, those are all part of the definition that we're considering. We're really blessed in McHenry County for this particular topic to have a wealth of existing historical planning. So some of these plans have already been mentioned, but very quickly, the 2030 comp plan addresses this topic broadly. The green infrastructure plan gets into it in great detail. So here's an opportunity now with this 2050 plan to take some of the concepts and principles of the green infrastructure plan and make them into land use policy. 2030 and beyond gets into it briefly, and then also we just learned this in our workshop recently, that we have this pedestrian and trails master plan that was developed by McDOT's and the McHenry County Mayor's Council, I believe. So it hasn't really been addressed in a broader context in terms of land use planning. I'm going to skip over these. I think I'm just going to go through real quick. So the comprehensive plan addresses a few of these topics. One thing very notable, the green infrastructure plan has a really good mapping framework that we can use going forward. Hasn't changed a whole lot since 2012, so we will be updating it, but it's still there. A number of policies from that green infrastructure plan can be rolled fairly directly, I think, as base policies or starting policies into the 2050 plan. 2030 and beyond had a few big ideas. I'm not going to get into them right now, but they all had some relevance to green infrastructure and the value of green infrastructure to the county. Probably the most notable thing about 2030 and beyond is it actually took the green infrastructure mapping and rolled it into the future land use map. So it did a significant update to future land use. And again, we'll be considering that kind of thing moving forward. I mentioned we have this very new, fresh off the presses, pedestrian trails master plan, so we can use this as a baseline for trail planning and greenway planning moving into the 2050 plan. We identified, or I should say the scope of work identified 6 different issues, and we received feedback on these issues from a stakeholders workshop on August 24th. And I probably don't have time to get into them in much detail, but the issues were, number one, the importance of conserving sensitive natural areas and open space. And we've done a good job historically, but there's more to be done, particularly making connections between isolated parcels, buffering parcels, et cetera. One of the things we're lacking on, we have probably a shortage of resources on, is now that we have all this open space, McHenry County Conservation District, for example, is 25,000 acres, do we have the resources to adequately manage that land? The general consensus is we don't have that right now, so we really need to be focusing on that. And it's things like control burning, controlling invasive species, et cetera. In terms of moving forward with mapping, we are in the process right now of collecting new and updated data from the Conservation District, from DNR, park districts, et cetera, et cetera. Brian mentioned updated floodplain maps. That's something we'll be collecting. New INAI inventory, I think Mary, you mentioned that. Oak woodlands mapping, that's all being collected. One of the other topics is adoption of conservation development principles and ordinances, which is a given in McHenry County because your UDO has a conservation design ordinance. Only one other community, well, actually a couple other communities have ordinances as well, Algonquin, Crystal Lake, and Woodstock. And so it's a great model. So we've got 27 other municipalities that don't have that right now. So there's just a great opportunity to kind of push that as an action item in the 2050 plan. Adoption of local green infrastructure plans. The county has a plan. Crystal Lake has adopted a plan. 2 other plans have been developed in Lakewood and Woodstock, but those plans haven't been developed. So again, there's a lot of opportunity there to work with other municipalities to take the county plan and make it their own through local adoption and local implementation. And finally, improved and expanded trail opportunities. Again, we've got a good network now. The pedestrian and bicycle plan has identified, again, some more opportunities for both regional trails and most importantly, local connections, because obviously the county itself can't do a whole lot in terms of trails, but with the conservation district, with park districts, with municipalities and other trails, we can make a really great, vital interconnection, an interconnected system in McHenry County. And so finally wrapping up, moving forward, how do we look at these issues and opportunities in terms of rolling them into something we can look at themes identifies themes in the 2050 plan. Number one, we've got some great resources we can build on the county. McHenry County is unique in all the counties in northeastern Illinois. That's why people really value living here. We can build on the green infrastructure mapping and leadership of the county, again, translating some information to municipalities. Intergovernmental cooperation is really key. I mentioned we had this workshop in August. We had, I think, 16 people, mainly representing conservation organizations, open space agencies, and others. We didn't really get any significant turnout from municipalities and park districts, so that's something we will be working on moving forward in terms of developing policies. And I think I'll just leave it at that. So any quick questions or comments? Again, a lot more detail in the actual memorandum.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
And we do have a section on infrastructure, which we all know, but I think we're gonna skip ahead to the historic preservation component. Juice and Deck also handled the infrastructure piece.
I've never had preservation skip over infrastructure. This is exciting. So I will cut some things out of my presentation just for time. I'm Erica Ruggiero, Historic Preservation Specialist and Principal with McGuire Gillespie. We're a historic preservation architecture firm in Evanston. So obviously, as part of the existing conditions memo, we looked at existing conditions in terms of what's happening with preservation in the county. We also did a windshield survey that I'll comment on and identified some possible historic resources and new conditions in the county, and obviously focused on issues and opportunities and how we can incorporate some of those and address those in the 2050 comprehensive plan. I will skip over regulatory framework and just say that in the county's Unified Development Code, one of the 12 priorities in Title 16 is preservation, and then you have several or individual ordinances and obviously your historic preservation chapter, which makes preservation a priority in the county's code. Additionally, there are nearly a dozen statutes in the Illinois compiled statutes that address preservation, including establishing preservation protocols for county boards. It enables municipalities to establish preservation laws. It provides for regulatory review, such as the Section 707 process, and it also provides for financial incentives like the property tax assessment freeze for residential properties and the state as well as the federal historic tax credits for income-producing properties. In McHenry County, you have 7 historic preservation commissions. Those are the advisory bodies that work with municipalities and the county to preserve and protect landmarks and districts. They're authorized to survey historic assets, prepare a register of local buildings, structures, sites, and districts, review applications for certificates of appropriateness, establish local standards for care and management of local historic resources, even down to just placing historic or plaques on historic properties. So they do a lot in terms of preservation at the local level. You also have several private organizations, societies, associations within the county that focus on historic preservation. There are 11 local organizations such as the Barrington Area, Cary Grove, Crystal Lake, Harvard, Huntley, and McHenry historical societies. You also have 2 statewide organizations such as Landmarks Illinois, and then you have 1 regional organization, which is the Northern Illinois Historic League. So there's a lot of opportunity for the public and regulatory side of preservation to intersect with the private preservation efforts. Additionally, McHenry County does have a preservation plan, also very exciting. Not many counties have one. And it focuses on 5 goals. Landmark and Preserve, which includes designation reports, historic resources surveys, like your rural resources survey. Also foster municipal cooperation and really focus on the enhancement and development of lines of communication between county government, municipal government, individuals and private organizations to preserve resources across incorporated and unincorporated areas. The cultivation of public knowledge, the maintenance of the character of the county through cooperation with developers, and the promotion of economic viability through historic resources. They outline the preservation plan outlines the strategies for how to achieve those goals. It includes a facade program, towards award programs, resource lists, networking, grant programs, and a few other opportunities. The county's historic assets include 13 properties, 12 properties in one district listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The county's first buildings to be listed on the National Register were the old McHenry County Courthouse and the Woodstock Opera House in 1974, with the most recent listing being the Colby Peterson Farm in 2020. Of the 13 locations, all are, as I mentioned, individual buildings except for the Woodstock Square Historic District. Furthermore, the county has designated 26 historic resources as local landmarks, which are nicely outside in the hallway. And the first local landmarks in the county were designated in 1993. Two other initiatives that are unique to McHenry County that the Historic Preservation Commission leads is the Heritage Grows Initiative and the Scenic Streets and Roads Program. Those are both outlined in the existing conditions memo, so I won't go through those in detail today. And then as part of our existing conditions memo, we focused on a windshield survey of the county's rural crossroad communities. Renee gave us a very nice list to start with, and then we kind of looked at historic atlas maps like the one behind me, and we identified additional areas of historic settlement that could be considered a rural crossroad community, as well as looked for individual resources noted on those maps, such as schools, creameries, cheese factories, mills. And then we set out driving the county to see if these resources still existed. And we were able to identify nearly 100 resources. I have continually identified more, but I have to stop myself at a point. So, and just to go through a few of those, several residences across the county that date from the mid-19th century. Another resource that I really wanted to get some photos of, but it was a little difficult just with the beautiful weather and people being out. I think you have the largest concentration of rural schoolhouses still. It's amazing how many still exist, and many of them are residences. So if you don't know what you're looking at, you wouldn't know that they were rural schoolhouses, but they are there. You also have several kind of early settlement churches, as well as a few schools. Obviously the Greenwood School, and then later in the history, the early 20th century, you have the, is it Solon Mills? Solon, okay, Mills School. And so there's lots of these rural churches as well, which are part of that settlement history of McHenry County. One of my favorite, you have a large number also of early general stores and post offices, which I think is also something very special, because a lot of times those buildings do not exist, they're no longer needed, and they're demolished. You also have a few industrial buildings. I think a few interesting on this page, the Bonnelly Brothers Garage is the first Harley-Davidson dealership in the county. The Alden Steam Mill was the first steam mill in the county. So very significant resources to the county that have not been recognized to date.
So Brendan, this information is so valuable. Is it possible that your team could record and stream this so we could look really
So
like the.
I will say, since the existing condition memo has been issued, I have been, they have all of my data, and I've created a map as well, and all of that will be included in the revised memo. Yeah.
And we can make, yeah.
I haven't, it's a little hard to get some photos because a lot are private residences. They are located right off major highways. There's no, or, you know, major roadways where there's.
So neat.
Yeah, where there's no place for me to easily pull over, and they also don't know that I'm doing this necessarily. One thing I will say in terms of issues and opportunities, which I've addressed in the memo, and won't go into detail here, but one thing I thought of as we were going through the presentation tonight, I am aware that the county is starting an update of their rural resources survey of 4 townships. I know it's Algonquin, I think Nunda, Grafton, and there's one other, based on the CLG grant for that project. Survey hypothetically should start in the next few weeks, and I think it'd be a really great idea for whoever's selected for that project, maybe to have like a little card that they can pass out to property owners, because it's all in unincorporated areas, that they can pass out and say, please look into the outreach survey. And that's a way to kind of cultivate that public knowledge that you need for preservation that's lacking, because what I found, there's so little information out there about these very specific resources, and then also support the comprehensive plan.
Okay, is there any chance to stream it, these
We
presentations?
can make a PDF of the PowerPoint and share that for sure. There's some formatting we gotta clean up, but we can definitely follow
Okay,
up.
yeah, and maybe a little narrative if that was possible, that
I
would.
mean, there are speaker's notes for a lot of the slides, so I think that would.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's better than nothing.
I'm
Okay.
happy, again,
I'm
yeah,
sorry
of
to give you a
course.
short shrift, I mean, you came.
No, it's
meeting
okay.
is streamed
If
too.
there's any
Huh?
questions
Our whole
for me,
meeting is
then-
streamed
well,
online.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're not gonna get the value of her entire presentation or anybody else's. Okay, Renee, you've got, Brendan, is there anything else? Your hour is up, mister.
So, all I wanna say is, we mentioned, we're working on coordinating meetings the week of November 28th. We've already got, I think we're gonna do a workshop here, we're working on hosting a workshop in Cary, they've already offered up to Village Hall. We're working on a 3rd venue. Marengo said they were kind of out of ideas for us, we couldn't do it there, so we're pivoting to look somewhere else, kind of toward central and western part of the county. But
Oh, and God forbid we do it in townships. You know what really ticks me about this whole thing is that the RPC doesn't know all the stuff that's going on. And we're supposed to be, the
this
cornerstone
is
of
the
the
notice,
plan.
today is the notice.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay, so
We
come on,
discussed it
Mary.
with
I'm
staff.
sorry,
Come on, Mary,
I'm sorry.
I
I
think
don't
these
think
people-
this is very professional.
I think these people have done a very good job. And I think
I'm
we
not
should- I think
saying
we should
anything
I
about
think we
the
should
job.
commend them. and-
I'm saying
So-
that we did not know about some of these things that they're planning.
Well,
And we have to fit them in the schedule after,
Well,
kind of after the
we
fact.
got a lot of moving pieces. So the week of November 28th is when you're planning to have all of these workshops?
We're trying to host 3 in-person workshops.
Okay,
And and also schedule a virtual one as well.
Okay, so it would, I think, help all the members if the sooner you can give us some of those dates, the better it would be, and where, the better it would be for all of us.
Right, so I had hoped to have all the details by now, but Marengo wasn't able to secure the venue we were looking at.
No,
So
I
got
am-
2 out of the 3.
I understand.
Sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so
It's-
next-
It's not easy to coordinate all that.
So within the next week, we will have details of the group to circulate and help us promote, and we'll be rolling out notice.
Okay, Adam, when do you
Could I
see?
add one?
Sure,
note
Adam,
on
please
that?
do.
When we send these out, we'll send them out individually. If you could reply right back to, Renee will be the point of contact for those when we get the dates.
Yeah.
Reply right back to her, hey, confirmation, whatever it might be. So not a reply all, but a confirmation back there. Then at least we know.
Yeah.
That would be
And
very,
if
very
if
helpful.
there's a township facility that can host 60 to 100 people, I'd be happy to know about it.
All right, and Renee, when do you suggest the next meeting? 3 months?
3 months.
Yeah, I think.
I defer to Brandon again,
What's that?
he's asking about the next
So-
RPC meeting will probably be around February?
Yeah, so we do these workshops after Thanksgiving,
I'll be.
take the feedback, create a series of kind of summary components that support everything we've been talking about tonight, plus that we review it with you in the new year.
Okay, so for point of discussion, what's a 3 months from now, February date on a Thursday night?
Do we have, I don't know, we have not talked about that date, so I mean, it's.
Well, why don't we do the same thing? Why don't, Adam, why don't you circulate
Yeah.
a proposed
We'll
date?
get a couple.
We can find it,
Yeah,
yes, a
monkey
couple of
survey or
months.
We'll throw it out there.
The second to last or the
February.
last February, yeah. Okay, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you for your patience, everybody, for going 35 minutes.
You can pick up a flyer on your way out. We have a program that I think would be of great interest to people. We're covering sensible salting.
Oh, yeah.
That's part of what Brian was talking about and others. So this would be a really interesting program, kind of a once-in-a-lifetime chance. So
All right, thank
grab a
you.
flyer.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Scott.
I meant jumping your bones and only the most.
Sorry, man, I couldn't. You know, River's always been my friend.
We have been on opposite sides of every political thing there is, and we're still buddies.
Well, you're right, 'cause I didn't up for the Wisconsin Dents.
Yeah, definitely.